Welcome to AP Biology. Today's presentation is going to be on the mechanism for natural selection. So natural selection was an idea that Darwin came up with a couple hundred years ago. And basically what he said was that species have the potential to overproduce. In other words, they produce way more individuals that can actually survive. And within those individuals, those offspring, there's going to be lots of variation. And certain variations are going to be better for the current environment than other variations. And so some individuals are going to survive better than others. And when those individuals reproduce, the new population is going to have characteristics that are different from the original population. And so we call that evolution. So change over time is evolution. Darwin's natural selection was just a mechanism for explaining why populations changed over time. So basically, if you wanted to define it, it's survival and successful reproduction of organisms that are best fit to the environment. The thing it counts on is death. So you got to have a lot of death in order for natural selection to work. If all the individuals are being successful, natural selection won't work. That's why we don't see very much natural selection in humans anymore, because we have so many other mechanisms to help us survive that we really don't have a lot of factors that are killing us off. There's a few types of selection that we can see in populations. One of those is directional selection. That's where a species gets pushed in one direction or another based on the current environmental conditions. A good example of this is the peppered moth, which we will go into kind of an in-depth explanation of in class. But prior to the Industrial Revolution, there was a lot of lichen that would grow on trees, and the light-colored peppered moth was much better hidden than the dark-colored peppered moth. And so these guys tended to survive much better. But then during the Industrial Revolution around big cities, a lot of soot formed on the trees, killed the lichen, and it made the dark variation much better at surviving than the light variation. And so the population flipped. Now they're still the same species, but it went from being about 99% light colored to about 95% dark colored. So in 100 years, the population flipped. It has now flipped back, and so now the woods are all covered in lichen again, and the light-colored moths are the predominant moth in the population. Stabilizing selection is where the two extremes are selected against, and so you select for kind of an average. An example of this was in humans prior to C-sections being a type of surgery we can do to help the survival of babies. There was a strong selection against really large size because it was difficult for mothers to give birth to large babies. And so the mom and the baby often died during pregnancy 100 years ago. And being small also was a problem. You had a lot of complications due to being small. Lungs weren't fully developed. Just a lot of things. They did create incubators to help babies that were born prematurely, but it's still a major disadvantage to be being born early. Nowadays with C-sections, if you're a big baby, they just take you out through the abdomen, and so it's not nearly as dangerous as it was in the past. And because of that, babies are getting bigger. Disruptive selection is where we see selection against the medium towards the two extremes. An example of that is in African swallowtails. There's strong selection against the hybrid and for the homozygous individuals in both populations. There's a reason for this. The two homozygous situations do a really good job of mimicking butterflies that are poisonous to predators. And so because this butterfly is toxic to predators, and this butterfly is toxic to predators. Looking like those butterflies helps you survive because you don't get eaten by predators as much. And so this characteristic and this characteristic have been selected for, and the hybrid version is not selected for. It gets eaten a lot, and so we tend to see a lot of butterflies that are homozygous dominant and homozygous recessive, and they tend to mate with other individuals similar to themselves.